Today in Matt's class, I'm going to show you secrets of how to use the airbrush for your mixed media illustration when trying to create a portrait that has that awesome larger-than-life movie poster look. So today I'm painting outside in the backyard for no particular reason other than the weather is beautiful out here, and I wanted to show you that you can do this kind of anywhere. If you've got a backyard, you probably don't want to do this. There's going to be overspray. My studio is set up to do airbrushing, but I just wanted to I felt like doing it outside today. Also, it's a little bit better air. Now, acrylic is non-toxic, but anytime you've got any kind of dusty anything that could be getting into your lungs, you just kind of don't want it to get in there. Although, if there was going to be anything like acrylic, this is like the safest stuff you can use. So it's not a big deal. Ideally, if you're like airbrushing every day, you probably want to have one of those ventilator masks on. I don't airbrush every day. I don't even airbrush every month. And especially because I'm outside today, it's just really not a big deal, so I'm not going to bother with it. But I do want to show you my arsenal and my little setup that I have just set up here in the backyard. So first of all, first and most important, I have my Starbucks right here at the ready. Next up, this can sometimes come in handy. This is just a water bottle that shoots water. Sometimes, there we go. And this can sometimes help clean the airbrush or sometimes quickly add water. And there's other quick effects that I can do with it that are pretty cool. Paper towels are good for a quick cleanup if you need to clean something up. There's also some techniques. I wanted to have my reference handy where I can see it, but sometimes when you're airbrushing, wind blows and then your reference flies everywhere. So this is just kind of handy to have them up here where I can see them clearly. Here is Princess Kamala, portrayed by Christy Dumar. So we finished our wash stage. Some areas definitely need to go darker and get more color. So I could do that by adding more washes, or to show you the airbrush, I'm going to show how you can kind of quickly add in some gradations and get it where it needs to go. And we've got obviously Eric Steele, who plays Aladdin, Fidgy, who plays Fidgy. I've got my washes here, and the washes that you use for the airbrush, these are the same washes that I mixed for the wash stage. Here is my airbrush, which I'll talk about last. I've got my bucket of water. This is going to come in handy for cleaning the airbrush, also adding water to some washes if I need. This is a garbage can, and a lot of times when I'm mixing stuff or I need to like dump some paint, I need a place that I can kind of quickly dump it, and this garbage can is just going to work great rather than it dropping on the ground. There's actually paint already all over the ground because paint got all over the place when my backyard was transformed into a Hong Kong marketplace for the opening action scene of the first Aladdin 3477 movie, which is who these characters are from, if you didn't know already. Let me talk about the airbrush. So this is just a standard airbrush. This is an Iwata HPC. This is the trusty airbrush I've used for a long time now. Honestly, any airbrush that you use, a good one usually costs about $100 or more. Once you're spending about $100, to me, I've never seen, now there are artists that'll disagree and they swear by these super amazing, you know, high detail $600 or $6,000 airbrushes. But honestly, this is like a $100 airbrush, and it works great for what I need it to do. This is an air compressor. I used to actually use a carbon dioxide tank. They're super quiet, but you have to keep getting them refilled, and that's a pain in the butt. So I picked up this air compressor for about $200. It's also an Iwata air compressor, and it works great. It's a little noisy. It's got that noise that it's making. But otherwise, it seems to work pretty good. This is a dual action airbrush, and it's also gravity feeding. So what you're doing, you're actually pouring the paint in the top. You don't want to spill it because paint can fly out of it, but this canister here is never going to fall off the airbrush. They have airbrushes where they have mini things that you can kind of plug into the side, but they can always fall out, and I've had them fall out on me before and splash and ruin my painting. So I like the gravity feeding. This also can splash, but at least the whole entire thing isn't going to drop out of it. So there's two things that this does. If you press down, just air is coming out. Ooh. What? Oh, does it feel good? Ooh. Yeah. So just air comes out, but then if I press down and pull back on the trigger, that's going to release paint. So not only air is coming out, but paint is coming through. So you can also use your airbrush to dry. Like if you're waiting for something to dry, if you get too close, you'll just push the paint around, but you could hold it far away, and it's just kind of lightly blowing air onto your characters. Okay, So first up, I want to get a little bit more tone happening, a little bit more skin tone. So what I'm going to do, I've already got my wash mixed here. So I'm going to make sure my wash is mixed well. And then anywhere that I think the skin tones need to go just a little bit more intensity of color or a little bit darker or a little bit more of a gradation, I'm going to use the airbrush. So I'm just going to pour a little bit in. I don't want it to splash anywhere. Oh yeah, I can see it's getting nice and wet there. All right, so I'm actually going to hold this up just so I've got my reference so I can see clearly. I can see Christy right here, so I can see the forehead needs to go darker right here. A little bit on the side of the nose. And I can see these subtleties that I can quickly spray in, and it just kind of softens the face. Now look, you can kind of see there it got a little bit wet. I want to be careful because it'll start to bead up, and I don't want that to happen. So a little bit goes a long way, and then let it dry. In general, the hair can go darker, but I want to be careful because some of that overspray is going to go into the blue, which isn't the worst thing in the world. And part of what's great about the airbrush is having some of that overspray. Again, for one, it helps get rid of the white. You probably heard me talk about that in a previous video. But it just softens the piece. Now this is textured. It's got that gesso on there, so this is looking a little bit more chunky, a little bit more gritty. And this is going to have a little bit more of an Indiana Jones effect to it. So some people like this look, some people it's just too much. Works better for a gritty character like Aladdin. Probably wouldn't look as good on Princess Kamala. I'm going to let this dry. So I'm going to spray now a little bit from afar to help this dry. So I'm pushing down, but I'm not pulling the trigger back. So all I'm doing is just spraying a little bit of air. And I don't want to get too close with it. I'll show you why. I'll show you what happens. Let's say we've got a bunch of paint. See what happens? See that awesome spidery-like creature? That's what happens if you're too close. And if you get too close to like a puddle of paint, it'll start spreading out kind of all crazy like that.
Baby, you're a firework.
So just gonna let some air pull back just a little bit. Let it dry. A little bit on the side of the face here. A little bit more on the forehead. A little bit more on the neck. Some of it beads up into the deep textures, but again, that's part of the look, and sometimes you like the way that it looks, and sometimes you don't. So some people like it. I kind of dig it. Right now I'm not digging it as much, but once this is done and it's got the color pencil and stuff, it's going to look great. So I'm going to pour the rest in here. Now I could clean out the airbrush, but the next color I'm going to use is a darker brown, so if a little bit of this color mixes in, it's not a huge deal. It's time to go a little bit darker. I'm going to mix my wash. This is dark brown, this is burnt umber. In the video before this, washes, I show how to mix these paints. So now anywhere that I need to go darker, either in the face or the hair, anywhere where I see that darker brown, I can go ahead and paint it in. There's a couple areas I can see are still wet, so I want to be careful. If I go too crazy with it, it's going to lift off the page, and I definitely don't want that.
What a difference.
Softens it right up, huh? Darkening up the hair. And this I could have done with washes. I just could have kept going darker, but this is just a quick way to kind of lay in some tone. A bit more on the side of the face. So I'm simply going to take the airbrush, drop it in this thing of water here, and simply shoot water through. The next thing I can do, there's a little needle in here, and the needle is sticking out right now, blocking the paint. And then as I pull back, the needle gets pulled back inside. So one thing I can do, I can block this with my finger, and it'll kind of bubble it up, and that kind of helps clean it. But I only want to do this when I have the trigger pulled back. If I do this when it's forward, first I could stab myself with a needle, but second of all, I could bend the needle, and I don't want to do that. So if I pull back on the trigger, see how that's kind of cleaning it out? It's backtracking, and that helps clean it. Remember how when I was putting purple in the shirt, it was like, oh my gosh, she's got a purple shirt now, and now not as much, but we're actually going to go darker with it. And then once we pull out those highlights, it's going to look awesome. Just a little bit of rosiness to his cheeks. Just a little, just to give a little bit of life in the skin. It was looking a little brown. And this just adds just a little more like blood into the skin. I can give a little bit of a border around this in the sky. A little bit more in the cheek here. So one of the things you can do if it's getting clogged repeatedly, you can operate where you take the back off, you unscrew this, you pull the needle out, clean the needle, and then you usually have two pieces in front, these two little nozzles, this piece right here, and then this piece right here is probably where it's getting clogged. So this is where the air shoots out. There we go. I can see there's little bits of paint in there, so it definitely got clogged. There's some paint acrylic that got stuck to the front of this. I can put this back on, put the nozzle back on front carefully. This needle is super sharp. You want to get the needle in there like so, without bending the needle. Once it's in all the way, tighten. There we go. Not clogged anymore. You'll see water's coming out just fine. You know, the wash is what happens. It's not that acrylic goes bad. It's always non-toxic. But if you've got it sitting in a container for a while, sometimes for years, because they'll last kind of forever, except that water evaporates. And when it does that, the paint just starts to get clumpy again, and it's kind of halfway between paint out of the tube and when it was the wash, and it's just kind of unpredictable, and it's hard to mix into a consistent wash again. So I've just made a brand new red wash, and I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to spray a little bit around the edges of this here. Oh yeah, there we go. Bringing in some darkness, just a little bit more. I'm going to splash these little beads kind of all around, all over the place, and that is going to mask where the water spots are going to be. Here we go. This is going to just almost like make it magical. It's just going to add like little pixie pollen in the air, and it's just going to be cool. It's just going to really make it kind of timeless. Next, I'm going to take my purple paint. Those drops are still wet, but if I add just a little bit of spray far away, because I don't want to push those water droplets around, but if I can kind of spray around that, again, giving kind of a vignette effect. You could use this technique anywhere. I'm doing a vignette, but you could really spray it anywhere. You can see those droplets are getting kind of dark. They're staying wet, but the rest of the background is going to dry a lot quicker. A little bit darker on the side. Good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a paper towel, and I am going to blot the lower half, which is going to get rid of all of the water droplets, and you can already see, voila, look at some of those there. Those look so cool. Get some more cooking. See if we can get some more of those bright areas. Oh, nice. And then some of these, it looks like there's a little bit more. They didn't get as bright, but you know what? That looks fun. And there's a little bit of these spots that kind of got into the brassiere area, but you know what? It just adds texture. You don't really want them in the face, so I tried to avoid the face. And there's a couple areas here in the hair, but again, I didn't really spray much color there, so it's not doing a whole lot. This is one of the reasons why acrylics are awesome, because they're water soluble, but then when they dry, they're waterproof, and that's what lets you do this technique. All right, so this is going to be a little bit crustier because there's so much texture. The water is going to fall between the grooves a little bit. Let's get some droplets everywhere. Kind of got to see where those droplets are going. You don't want to have too many or they'll puddle up into weird shapes instead of little circles. They'll start connecting with each other. So now I'm going to spray in the red. Here we go. A little bit more. So what I want to do now, because I think this red might not be enough, like some of these areas it's just not getting dark enough. So I think what I want to do now, I want to go ahead, I want to add some purple to this and just get just a little bit more of a vignette. In the corners, a little bit darker down here. This one's going to need some surgery, but I think overall it's going to turn out pretty cool. Because this had gesso, a lot of it is wet, like even the parts that aren't the puddly drips. So I want to be careful with this one and not lift it up too much or all of it is going to come up. I can just dry it a little bit. I got to stay far away or I'm just going to blow the drips of water. But if I can just dry the paint and not the splotches. This one might be a little more unpredictable because it's got I really went all out with the textures of gesso. Ooh, it's actually kind of cool. Oh, it's got a little splotch on his face. Whoops. But you know what?
Yeah.
I'm gonna roll with it. I'm gonna say happy accident is what I'm gonna call that. Yep, there's a little spots on Fiji, but you know what? A lot of this is gonna get painted over. We still have 2 more stages, so it's a little crazy.
Yeah,
but
that orange and yellow, that's wild.
right now they're way too soft. So what the next step is opaque painting on top of this. That's what we are gonna do next. Come back, we got 2 more. Did you enjoy class today? If so, give me a like. If there's something you'd like to see me cover in a future video, let me know what that is in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I've also got a video series called Sketchbook Challenge that helps your drawing, creativity, and fill up an awesome looking sketchbook. Plus, there are videos on You Can Draw Star Wars, Hollywood is Dead, and sneak peeks at the Aladdin 3477 motion picture trilogy. In order to not miss any new videos, hit that notification bell. Sharing is caring, and it's great to inspire your friends. Share this video on social media and your friends will share awesome art tips they find with you. If you're on Instagram, you can follow me at Matt_Busch_Instagram. I'll see you back in the classroom soon. Don't be tardy.